Just have to unmute yourself, and there we should be ready to go. Yeah, if you could just hold for 1 second, we're just having live stream issues. All right, you're good to go now, Rob. Thanks a lot.
Good evening, Town Council. I'd like to thank you for allowing me to speak at this meeting. I've been a lifelong resident of Grimsby, born and bred up in the escarpment, grew up on a farm, lived there for 28 years. So I'm also an OFAH member, and I'm the vice president of the Clinton County Coyote Club, which is a lot of people don't, I believe in council, probably don't know what Clinton County is, but that's going way back. I'm also an avid archer and firearm hunter for the past 30 years. In short, I'm pretty much in tune with what's going on with hunting in our area, as I have a lot of contacts in hunting and fishing and et cetera. Okay. The hunting community is much larger than we all thought. With the Zoom call last week, I was shocked to see how many people were on it. And after the Zoom call, I spoke to a bunch of people, and they had no idea it was on, just due to social media, not promoting it enough, I guess. The hunters support a lot of community initiatives and businesses with their tags and the equipment we buy. It's a very important part of our community. It's needed. It's been around for a long time. It's our heritage. A lot of people, me growing up in the escarpment, there's always been a disconnect with people who live down the hill, we call it, from the people who live up the hill. I see our mayor now lives up on the hill, so I hope he's connected with us now. But it's just been
absolutely.
It's been a great disconnect. It's just been people up on the escarpment live a different life than people down the hill. If you have a problem with wildlife, with anything, it's dealt in a different way. It's not, people up in the escarpment aren't going to phone their counselor and say, hey, I got a coyote in my backyard. Can you do something about it? They take care of it. I mean, you never know what happens. Like nobody will know what happens because that's just the way they are. Farmers are like that. Going back to the hunting, we support a lot of communities. We do a lot for the communities, and we also support a lot of business. Grimsby Tackle is one of our mainstays. We do a lot of business there, and it's done well for him. Archery hunting, in particular, is a very intimate experience with nature. If any one of you can grab a chair and sit out in the bush for 2 hours with nothing, no cell phone, nothing, get back to me and tell me how much you like it. Nobody can contact you, nobody around you, nothing. You can't take that away from people, especially in this time of COVID. I mean, I talked to a lot of guys, and it's a lifesaver for them. Being cooped up or working from home, et cetera, it's a godsend for them. For me, I've always enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed nature. I've always enjoyed being outdoors, and that's just what it is. I think the reason I'd like to promote new discharge bylaw is we have a lot of, Grimsby is a farming community from way back. It's divided now, east and west of town. There's still tender fruit farms. But up on the hill, it's by far one of the mainstays of a lot of cash crop farmers, a lot of tender fruit farmers up on the hill. In particular, one that I hunt. I'd like to explain to some people here what goes on here. This fellow is a Concord grape farmer. Welch's Grape Juice closed down a couple of years ago. He sold all his Concord grapes there. Now nobody makes grape juice here. It goes to the States. Now put yourself in this fellow's position. He sells his grapes today. He doesn't get a paycheck for 2 years. That's right. He doesn't get paid for 2 years for these grapes. Every grape that he gets is a bonus for him. I mean, it's the farming has changed. Jeff's familiar with it. It's just how it is. There's a lot of tender fruit damage, grape damage, soybeans and corn. A brother of mine is a cash crop farmer, and he tells me you can get you can get 120 bushels of corn per acre at $5 an acre. One raccoon will flatten an acre of corn, and it's useless. It can't be harvested because the combine can't pick it up. So that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with money that's lost for farmers. I know a lot of you aren't familiar with that, but it always comes down to money. Everything comes down to money. We're in a situation here where I feel we need to continue this hunting, and it's just how I feel. A white-tailed deer will eat 6 pounds of food a day. That's a ton of food a year. And again, the farms that I hunt, they do a lot of damage to the trees, a lot of damage to the crops. A white-tailed buck in the fall will rub his antlers on trees, and it's usually young trees. Tender fruit trees are destroyed by them. The farmer that I hunt, he loses so many trees a year, they just don't come back after a deer does it. And it's devastating to the farmer. Archery hunting is done from a tree stand primarily, and you're 15 plus feet up in the air. It's a very safe sport. You identify your target 200 plus yards away. You can see anything coming. So there's no chance of people walking up on with their dog under a tree. And if it is, you're going to see them. There's no chance of any safety issues there. An arrow for an archer will cost them $30+ each. So you're not going to randomly shoot a bunch of arrows for nothing. I mean, it's an expensive sport to get into, expensive sport to stay in, and it's a long time commitment. And generally, an archery hunter is more intimate, more more in tune with what's going on with nature than a gun hunter. Primarily, it's different. I don't want to get into that, but that's just how it is. I primarily hunt coyote on the escarpment under the Pest Animal Clause. I have a few farms where few properties where they have lost dogs, and not one or two, like 3 dogs. What'll happen in the cold dead of winter? There's no food. There's no food for a coyote. They got to work hard. When it's minus 20, minus 30, they'll eat anything. One coyote will lure a dog out, and there will be 2 or 3 other coyotes or plus waiting for that dog. And what they'll do is they'll play with the dog, just like your 2 dogs would play. And in comes a pack and they kill the dog. I mean, you don't hear a lot of this, but it happens. You won't hear about it. If somebody won't call their councilman and say, this is what happened, they'll deal with it. And that's where I come in. I get invited to hunt a lot of properties from this. People feel threatened by coyotes. I've knocked on dozens of doors, and I've never been refused a coyote hunt because people don't like them. It's plain and simple. And in our club in Smithville, we run hounds with them in the winter. We'll shoot between 60 and 100 coyotes a winter. And there's always more. In short, they're never going away. You're always going to have this problem. That's about all I can say. I hope council keeps the Pest Animal Clause in the bylaw. It's a good thing to have. Discussing with the Zoom meeting last week, there's a gentleman that hunts Peninsula Ridge Winery. Bo hunts it. And I also mentioned to Councillor Sharp about west of Casablanca. There's a lot of farmland there that they have to, tender fruit farms, they have to protect themselves from the birds for their crop damage. And if you don't have a discharge allowance there for shotguns to shoot or scare the birds away, other than bird bangers, bird bangers, the birds get used to them. You need that in there. That's about all I can add to this at this time. I've pointed out in the Zoom meeting last week that Brian McRae also said that there's an organization that donates or helps financially with bows for youth. I've offered to help out any way I can to get Grimsby's youth into some sort of program for that. I mean, I'd like to see a bonus of this. I mean, you have that park up on the hill in Grimsby that somehow that can be utilized there. There can be something done there, a building put up, a backstop, or whatnot. And this is a positive, the way I look at it from this whole thing happening. Maybe we can do something about this, do something positive from it. That's about all I have to say. If anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Great. Thank you very much, Rob, for your presentation. Any questions from council? Seeing none, we have a resolution to receive the
Councillor
delegate.
Sharp,
Pardon me?
Councillor Sharp had his hand up.
Oh, I didn't see it on the screen, so. Councillor Sharp, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Mr. Wiersma. You were talking about coyotes in Smithville, and you said that you guys shoot 60 to 100 coyotes during the winter. And I just wonder, is that regulated under provincial? And
Yeah.
Is there something that makes it fair that you don't just kill off an entire coyote population?
No. How do I explain this? As far as I know, the coyote is the only animal that can be hunted 365 days a year. The Ministry of Natural Resources kind of promotes it. They're a pesterous animal, plain and simple. They're an invasive species. They're not going to go away. You can't. I'll give you an example. One particular block we hunt in Smithville. We'll go there on a Saturday. There'll be 5 coyotes. We'll end up getting 3 or 4, let's say, or even all 5. Next Saturday we go there. Guess what's there? 3 to 5 more coyotes. It's just there's, and what our group does is we donate. We basically give these coyotes to the ministry, and they bring them to Guelph, and they do studies on them. And I'll give you a little side note on this. I don't know the exact name of this. Brian may know, but it was in short, here's what happens. A coyote will poop, your dog will eat it, your dog will lick your face. You will get sick. 3 or 4 years ago, 10% of the population had it in coyotes that we shot and that were spread all over Ontario. As an example, they tested them in Guelph. They said 10% have it. That's on the rise. And it's gone up to the rise so much that the last time I was at my vet went to a seminar about this. It was promoted by Health Canada. So that's how concerned they are about this. That again, your dog could roll in it. You pat because dogs do that. You roll. Your dog rolls in it. You pat your dogs. The eggs are on your hands. You put your hand in your mouth. You're gonna get sick. And apparently, it's a dead. I don't know what it's called, but I don't know the name of it. Brian may know it, but it's a deadly sickness.
So what I was getting at though is that it is regulated by the Ministry of Natural Resources.
Yes.
And there's no season for it, but it's a fair practice, right?
There's an open season 365 days a year with coyotes.
Yeah. Okay. What I was just trying to get the point out is that it's not just this is regulated, and
Yes.
we're not just a free for all.
Yes, it's regulated. It's well regulated.
You have a license to do that, right?
Yeah. Yes, a coyote falls under a small game license, so anybody that hunts coyotes has to buy a small game hunting license. Similar, like with a rabbit as well.
Okay. Thanks. That was all the question I had.
Okay. All right.
Councillor Vardy.
Thank you. I have some comments, but I don't know. They're not necessarily questions, but they're concerns, and I want to be able to share them. Would you like me to do that now, or is it better later?
I think we'll have you do that after both delegations.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cadwell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jordan, and thank you, Rob, and Brian too, for coming again to our meeting tonight. The meeting of last week, the Zoom meeting, I took notes and I learned so much from all the participants, and I really appreciate that. I want to thank you for that too. A couple of questions, Rob. You mentioned about the investment that hunters have to make, equipment. How much is a deer tag? I guess or even, well, there's no moose around here, I guess, but is it mainly deer tags that the hunters are purchasing? And could you just elaborate a little bit on that, Rob? And I've got another question too. Thank you.
Yeah. So every hunter has to, who wants to archery hunt, has to apply for the wildlife management unit they're in, which in Grimsby is 88. Anything on the north side of Mud Street is 88. On the other side is 89B. So you have to enter for a draw for a tag for either a buck or a doe. And I believe, if I remember correctly, it's $50 or $55 a tag, and you're allowed to shoot one deer per year with that tag.
Great. Thank you, Rob.
Oh.
The other question I have, do you find that a lot of the animals, coyotes, deer, do they get down to the base of down to the urban area in Grimsby a lot? I know we had an issue, I think early in our, a couple of years back or so, whatever, maybe last year, Rob, I forget, with the coyotes out in the West End. I think they had their, I'll call them their homes, I apologize, along the CN train tracks and that. So is this a common occurrence, or is it maybe a cycle, or just so if you could help me out there, Rob, thanks.
The coyote is the most adaptive creature on the planet. It's been said that if we end today, all that's going to be left is coyotes and cockroaches. They're incredible. I do a lot of fishing in the lake down in Grimsby. I was fishing last year, early spring, and I saw a fox run down the rocks behind the big houses all the way down by Nels. I used to be a shift worker. I retired from Ford recently. I came home at 3 o'clock in the morning, got out of my car. There's a coyote standing on the road. I did a little lip squeak, sound like a mouse. He came running at me. I started waving my hands. Then my neighbor across the road from me last week was out in Murray Street Park, shined his flashlight. There's 2 coyotes there, and he's got a little dog on a leash. They're here to stay. They're everywhere. The difference between an urban coyote and a rural coyote is urban coyotes don't howl. They don't make any noise. They can make noise, but obviously they're smart enough that people are around. They don't want you knowing that you're there. You're never going to get rid of them. They're always going to be there. The one that you had in the spring was a den close by, and they're very aggressive when they have dens, when they have their little ones. There's a documentary on CBC called, I think it's Welcome the Coy Dog or something to do with that. And they said that there's been breeding, there's DNA in coyotes from the eastern wolf. We have noticed in our group that we've been doing this 20 plus years that they are getting bigger. They are a bit more aggressive, but the old timers tell me they're much bigger than they used to be. So
I can't help but ask, would you say they're wily?
yeah, they're the most, they're the hard, I enjoy hunting them because they're the hardest thing to harvest. They're the hardest thing. They're smart. If I do this, the next time they see that, they won't come because they'll know that's danger to them, that I'm a human. They're very smart, very smart.
Great. Thank you very much, Rob.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, thank you for your presentation, Rob. Moved by Councillor Sharp, second by Councillor Cadwell. Resolved that the delegation from Rob Wiersma be received. All in favor? That's carried. And our second delegation is Mr. Brian McCrae, Senior Advisor, Community and Partner Relationships, Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters. Welcome, Brian.
Good evening and thank you. Actually, before I just dive in, I just wanted to make 2 quick comments just back from Rob's presentation. I think it's important to know as well for hunting, and actually it pertains to hunting and fishing, but all revenues from hunting and fishing licenses goes into the Fish and Wildlife Special Purpose Account, which funds basically all MNRF and some all the work that they do, conservation work, the conservation officers that you see, research and science, all that sort of stuff. So all the funds from the Fish and Wildlife hunting regulations or from hunting licenses go into that special purpose account. And I also wanted to say with regards to the coyote stuff, most people do hunt coyotes, as Rob said, in the wintertime. And that's primarily based because that's when the fur is prime as well. And in most cases, those furs are actually sold at the fur harvesters or to a fur sale. There are rules and regulations that hunters have to abide by where they can't waste fishing game aspects, anything that's quote unquote valuable to the animal. So I just wanted to throw those 2 points in. Well, good evening, Your Worship, members of council, staff, and those OFH members either participating in, like Rob, or watching tonight's Zoom meeting. My name is Brian McRae, and I am the Senior Advisor, Community and Partner Relations for the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters. On behalf of our 100,000 members, supporters, and subscribers, and our 740 affiliated clubs, thank you for affording us the opportunity to speak on the Discharge of Firearms bylaw here tonight. I would like to start by thanking you, Your Worship, and Council for calling this special council meeting to deal with this particular issue. For the councillors who were able to participate in last week's meeting, much of what you will hear was read last week. Over the last decade, the OFAH has been involved in approximately 100 discharge bylaws at municipal councils across the province. In many cases, local councils or staff have contacted the OFAH seeking our assistance in crafting these bylaws, given our expertise in the matter. The OFAH have also appeared at dozens of committees and councils across Ontario to make presentations on discharge bylaws and have worked in partnerships with those same municipalities to create bylaws that do not impede legal hunting, trapping, and/or recreational shooting opportunities while respecting public safety. A couple of recent examples of our involvement in the area would be our participation and involvement in recent reviews in Thorold and the City of Hamilton, and I'd be happy to provide contact names for those who I worked with during these reviews if you're interested. While we recognize that under Section 119 of the Municipal Act, it allows for municipalities to enact, create, or amend discharge of firearm bylaws in the interest of public safety, we question whether or not this is actually the case. From our understanding, this bylaw was quickly and quietly amended with no consultation from one complaint. One complaint, justified or not, does not warrant an immediate broad brush stroke change to a bylaw that single-handedly eliminated hunting in all of Grimsby, especially without public consultation. I would like to stress that hunting is not a public safety issue, nor is shooting a bow in traditional rural areas. Were there any charges laid in connection with this particular issue? Is this a neighbor dispute? Have there been other issues to help justify such sweeping changes, documented with the police and/or conservation officers? Was the public consulted on such sweeping changes? What exactly is the public safety issue towards legal hunting to justify this change? Now, we do understand that these are just some questions that should have been answered prior to any change. There are already a plethora of provincial and federal rules and regulations for hunting and trapping and recreational shooting that individuals must adhere to, so we are curious as to what deficiency the town of Grimsby has found to justify even further restrictions. In saying that, we fully understand that there are circumstances that do justify prohibitions in particular areas, but again, proper consultation should have occurred prior to any change, and it should have been only in the areas of concern, i.e. a populated urban area. Last week, I spoke about a number of issues we saw with the bylaw, but tonight our ask is much simpler, and I believe is the reason why this meeting was called. We suggested last week, and we are here tonight to ask council to immediately rescind the bylaw that prohibits the use of bows, which systematically eliminated legal hunting opportunities, with the added direction for staff to work with stakeholders like us, the OFAH, to craft a new bylaw that conforms to the wishes of council to enhance public safety while respecting legal activities like hunting, which is recognized as a heritage activity by both the provincial and federal government. There was much discussion about where to draw the line on where to permit the use of bows, and admittedly, I'm not as familiar with the area as everyone in the Zoom call tonight. However, last week there was consensus that the escarpment is an easy location and one that makes a lot of sense. I'd be happy to discuss other issues with the current bylaw if interested, or additional impacts with the current bylaw, which in fact reduces public safety because of increased car collisions, decreased wildlife management. Hunting is the MNRF's most effective population management tool, increased crop and livestock depredation, or the loss of revenue for the town. However, I believe if staff is directed to craft a new bylaw which respects public safety and heritage activities like hunting, much of our concern can be mitigated through that process. I'm here tonight to once again offer our assistance to work with staff and council to craft a revised bylaw in the coming months. By rescinding the current bylaw here tonight, your constituents will be able to salvage at least a little bit of the hunting season in which they have already invested a great deal of time, money, and effort, including purchasing their deer tags. But most of all, it will show your constituents that you are listening and are committed to getting this right. It is my hope that the original intent was not to eliminate hunting. I wish to thank each of you again for allowing me to speak here tonight. To reiterate once more, our intent would be to work with staff and council on a bylaw that takes into considerations the needs and wishes of council while recognizing and maintaining our heritage activities like hunting that have taken place within your town for generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Brian. Certainly thorough, and yes, we will be happy to address that. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Sharp and Councillor Cadwell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jordan. Through you to Mr. McCray. So you said, and I heard you say this before, that that the money raised through the hunting and gaming license it goes to the, what does it go to? The Ministry of Natural Resources?
It goes in. Yeah, it goes into the Fish and Wildlife Special Purpose Account, which basically funds the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry for basically all of their initiatives, right from research and science to enforcement, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and when I was at the open house last week, there was a few other people there, not just yourself, and they talked a bit about managing wildlife on the farms, and so, but the ministry is involved, and they're regulating how many deer you shoot or how much. Like they're making it a fair sport of hunting, correct?
Yeah, that's right. So hunting and fishing, but in this situation, hunting is 100% regulated through the provincial government, through the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. They set, so they essentially will take Ontario and they've broken it up into little sections, which are called wildlife management units. And each wildlife management unit is regulated. In this situation, Grimsby is if I'm not mistaken, Rob, you can help me, but I believe it's 88. They have their own specific regulations for those WMUs. And in each WMU, and again, Grimsby is a bow-only hunt for deer, there is a quota of antlerless tags that are available for that area. So absolutely, deer populations, any populations, are regulated through the MNRF. And as Rob said, with deer, in most cases, one license, which is 55 and change, it gives you the opportunity to harvest one animal.
Okay, it's good to know that it is regulated and that the money generated from it is going towards managing wildlife, and that's an important thing. And I also wanted to just point out that Grimsby is allowed bow-only hunting forever, I presume. Is that true?
I'm not confident in answering. I'm sure there was a firearm season maybe at one point for a particular species. I'd have to do some research on that. I don't want to give the wrong answer, Councillor Sharp, but I could definitely look into that. Okay. I'll look to town staff for the answer to that. Thanks, Brian. That's all, Mayor Jordan.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Councillor Cadwell.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jordan, through you to Brian. Again, thank you for all your expertise that you've brought last week and again this week. Just a couple of quick questions, Brian. I heard a little while ago that the town of Pelham, they just updated their, I believe it's their hunting bylaw. And did you have any involvement, or did your organization have any involvement with Pelham's? Don't quote me on that. I'm sorry, but this is what I heard from somebody, that the town of Pelham, they just redid theirs. So yeah. Not the most recent ones I've worked with right in your area was obviously the city of Hamilton, which was just kind of put to bed. I'm going to say the end of 2018. It was about a 2-year review that we were involved with.
and I sat on the committee that they formed to recraft that bylaw. And then I worked with staff with Thorold on theirs, which I believe again was 2018. Pelham, I'd have to look, not in the the most recent history, but as I said, we've worked with literally probably close to 100 municipalities in the last 10 years on their bylaws.
Thank you, Brian. Also, what the flavor that I was getting from last week's Zoom meeting was obviously your expertise was well recommended by many of the, if not all of the participants. And I think there was something about it. You would be willing to help us out at no cost too. I know that was mentioned, Brian. I don't mean to put you on the spot there, but I did hear it at the meeting. So I'll end there with a comment then, Brian. I really look forward to your expertise, and if Rob's involved too, you folks really helping us get this bylaw, get it done right for Grimsby. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And yes, we would absolutely jump at the opportunity to work with Staff Council. Won't cost anything. That's part of our services. Although I see the Movember to Remember sign, so maybe a few donations to the Movember. But no, all kidding aside, 100% we would be happy to work with you guys.
Excellent. Councillor Vane.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to, I didn't hear Rob or Brian say this, but I just wanted to make a comment about the WMUs. That also one of the things that they're very big on is if you read Out of Doors magazine, which Brian should be aware of, I believe, and so is Rob. In there, they specifically talk about different WMUs and town councils getting involved because the province does regulate. If, for example, Grimsby had a shortage of deer or something and they were trying to regrow the population, they would restrict deer hunts here in this WMU. So it is very well managed. And I think it's an excellent system the way they've got it. That's my opinion anyways. I'm not an avid hunter like you two, but just my opinion. I just want people to be aware that there is a lot of conservation in this as well. Thank you.
Councillor Bothwell.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. And Mr. McCrae, thank you for your presentation. I've listened to some very informative information from your group at the open house as well. I was reviewing the City of Hamilton's bylaw, and it's quite extensive. It was done in May 2019. It was very well done, and it incorporates bow hunting specifically, as well as restrictions on prohibited areas with mapping for Grimsby. Just a quick question on the definition of firearm and bow, because I noticed that they've now been separated under the Firearms Act regulations, and the Criminal Code have different definitions, and the ministry actually on their definition on the website includes bow under firearm. So I think we need to make a clear distinction, is that correct, between a bow and a firearm when we're looking at doing our descriptions of the two? And we need to make sure that where we want to incorporate rules on both, that we do specify them individually so that they're not grouped into one big group called firearms. Is that your feeling?
Well, first, I'd like to thank you for the nice words about the City of Hamilton. We were part of a committee of about, I want to say there were 4 or 5 of us with staff and the local police force and ourselves and the Conservation Authority, and we worked. We sought a lot of feedback from open houses and everything, so I appreciate you noticing what's in that bylaw. So last week, and for the councillors that were able to participate last week, I actually spoke about the definition that's currently being used, and it speaks to firearms as being called as weapons, etc. And when it comes to discharge of firearms bylaws for this type of activity, generally these bylaws are put in place because of hunting or recreational shooting. And, I think the councillors that were on last week's call kind of got a sense of that when people were referring it to a no hunting bylaw, because when you restrict the use of firearms or bows, it eliminates hunting opportunities. And we spoke about, a firearm for the use of hunting, whether it be a bow or a gun, is a tool that's used for hunting. And weapons are more defined based on the criminal act where they're used for criminal activities. Now, when it gets into the use of the firearms, and this is where some of the different definitions get into it, if you use a bow or a firearm in the act of a criminal act, endangering others, it can be then charged as a firearm because it's being used as a weapon, essentially. Now, in the City of Hamilton's bylaw, we made a clear distinction in the two, and I know Rob touched on this in his presentation, but obviously the range for of a bow compared to a firearm is drastically reduced when it comes to for hunting in particular. So that's why you see two different buffer zones between bows and firearms in that one.
Yeah.
But yes, we would definitely recommend two separate definitions if that's the wishes of council. And I have examples of both definitions of firearms and for bows that we have used and other councils have used across the province that would fit kind of what you're looking for, I believe.
Thanks. Yeah, I did notice that there is some consistency. I think it was, I can't remember if it was Lincoln or one of the other ones that I was looking at, did use very similar. Your Hamilton wording seems to be the most recent across the board for bow. So yes, it was interesting that the buffer for bow hunting was 50 meters. And I think it's 100 meters for firearms, right? From residential or other zones or a sensitive area. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Seeing no further questions, we just need a mover and seconder to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Bain, second by Councillor Vardy. Moved by Councillor Bain, second by Councillor Vardy. Resolved that the delegation from Brian McRae, Senior Advisor, Community and Partner Relations, Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters, be received. All in favor? That's carried. Yeah. I just want to thank both Rob and Brian for your participation tonight and for your wealth of knowledge on hunting and bow hunting that you've brought to our council meeting tonight. And we will certainly not hesitate to reach out further for both your knowledge and participation as we craft an updated bylaw. So just thank you very much and have a good rest of your evening. Up next, we have Jeff Stevenson from our bylaw department. Jeff, welcome.
Good evening, Your Worship.
Does council have any questions to Jeff? Councillor Bothwell.
So I guess what we're just doing is because we've reviewed the report that Jeff's provided. So we're just asking questions on that report. Is that correct, Mayor?
Yeah, yes, I believe that is what the clerk's given me direction to do.
Okay. So again, it's a clarification point. And I had this email discussion back and forth because on the public meeting last week, there was a number of hunters and bow hunters and whatever who were referencing the OMNR's Sunday hunting regulation. And when I looked at that map, Grimsby in area 88 was showing as being open for hunting for Sundays, and that wasn't correct, right? And at this point, so just to clarify, at this point, Grimsby does not have hunting permitted, sport hunting, and that posting on the OMNR website was probably incorrect. Is that right? Oh, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Through you, Your Worship. Yes, that's correct. I did some research. In order to allow the town to permit hunting on Sundays, we would have to pass a bylaw to that effect. And my research proves that shows that we haven't passed a bylaw. So, in effect, that map, which shows Grimsby having hunting permitted on Sundays, is incorrect. It should be amended by the ministry.
And whatever we do tonight, and I'm not sure what motion's going to come forward, but what I heard from OFA was that we look at rescinding or reconsidering our approval of the new bylaw and go revert back to the old one. I just want to clarify, if we revert back to the old one, for now, would that allow bow hunting for the season to continue till December 31st, which is the end of the season?
Yes, through you, Your Worship. Yes, that is correct. It would permit bow hunting in the town.
Would there be any restrictions on where people could bow hunt if we rescinded it to the previous bylaw?
Not at the present time, no.
Okay. I guess that's my questions for now. I have a few more when we look at the mapping that you've provided, just because I have a concern about, like I said, the Hamilton bylaw provides some guidelines as to buffers and protection of residential zones. And I'm just concerned, and I understand from the public meeting that there was some desire to have the boundary be the top of the escarpment. And one of the maps goes into the urban area, actually, well, not urban area, into the Niagara Escarpment Commission area in the downtown, north of the escarpment, into that area down by where Councillor Sharp lives. I just have a little concern about that, because the bylaw, if we look at what we currently have and we look at just providing, we look at just permitting bow hunting based on the map alone and not amending the bylaw. There's language in the bylaw I think that we have to amend as well if we're looking at incorporating bow hunting into the new bylaw. So that's why I was looking at the cleanest way to try to allow bow hunting until the bylaw can be amended in a fulsome manner. And so my thinking was that we would do a reconsideration and just allow it to go back to the way it was until we can fulsomely and completely review this bylaw to get it correct, rather than try to piecemeal it tonight, because I'm concerned that if we just tack a map onto it, we do have some language we have to clean up then to comply with that map in the bylaw. So that's just my thinking, Jeff, is just that I don't know if it's as simple as just taking a couple maps or a map and saying, here, let's permit it here. Because I think then we have to look at the whole wording of our new bylaw and actually incorporate some language into it about that definition of the map and add bow here and there and a few other things. It just is going to end up becoming, I think, a lot of work effort to try to refine the new bylaw tonight, rather than looking at perhaps just rescinding and then getting this clean and correct. Because I looked at the Hamilton one. The Hamilton one's pretty complete, as well as the Lincoln one's got some definitions on the hunting and the buffers and all that too. So I want to make sure we're doing the right thing tonight when we look at how we deal with it and get this to a place where the bow hunters in particular are able to manage their sport up until December 31st. Thank you.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. Through the mayor to the clerk, I have a resolution that I prepared for tonight. It deals with some of those things. Is this the appropriate time to make that?
Yes, it's appropriate to make it. So I have you as the mover.
Kevin
I'll
Ritchie.
I'll just read it first and then we can have discussion on it.
I'll second.
You got
Councillor Bothwell, you said you'd second it?
Kevin Ritchie. We already talked about this one.
All right.
Thanks,
Councillor
Mayor Jordan.
Ritchie's going to second it. Moved by Councillor Sharp, second by Councillor Ritchie. Resolved that the memo regarding discharge of firearms and bows, bylaw 20-62, be received, and further resolved that staff be directed to bring a comprehensive bylaw for discharge of firearms and bows, and that the following be approved to be enforced until the new bylaw is implemented. That bylaw 2062, discharge of firearms and bows, be amended to add boundary areas as shown on boundary map number 2, and that bylaw 20-62 apply to the areas north of the Niagara Escarpment as shown in red on the boundary map, and that the previous bylaw 76-38 apply to the areas south of the Niagara Escarpment and as shown in green on the boundary map. Discussion? Councillor Sharp?
Yeah, so when it comes to this, so I brought this resolution and we actually called this meeting because we had some public consultation last week on Tuesday or whichever day, I forget. And the consultation we had was with hunters and farmers, and it seems like the hunters and the farmers really are working together in something that I would call wildlife management. And so they talked to us, and we had like 31 people. There was probably 40 or 50 people registered, but only about 31 or 33 showed up to our online meeting. And each of them talked, but the hunters and the farmers kind of were speaking about the same thing. And it was the farmers that they were having animals damage their crops. And Mr. Wiersma earlier talked about like the amount of that one animal can eat. I don't know all those details, but they were talking about that. And then they talked about the ministry. It regulates the amount that you can hunt, and it's fairly tightly regulated. But some of those guys mentioned that there's really no natural predators around here for these animals like coyotes and deer. And one of the only things that reduces their populations is motor vehicle accidents. And you get deer hit by. You get a larger population of deer and they get out in the streets and they get hit by a car, and there's really nothing other than, I guess, old age. And so it really made sense to me that in certain areas, especially south of the escarpment, that they ought to be allowed to discharge at least bows for the purpose of hunting. And then there's obviously some areas north of the escarpment, which is like down the mountain, where it's not appropriate. And we talked about this. We have a map. The map was drawn by our town staff, and it is basically a line along the top of the escarpment, but it includes a small area in the east end, which is Peninsula Ridge. It's like a 50-acre farm or something. And I was also contacted from some of my residents that live. So there's farms just west of Casablanca. There's a few operational farms, and a couple of them are just cash crops, but there's a couple of tender fruit farms in there where they have problems with birds. And like Mr. Wiersma talked about, deer rubbing their antlers up against the tender fruit trees, and especially the young trees, can really do damage to them. And I was contacted by some of these farmers, and they said that they weren't in support of this bylaw because it affects their farming practice. And although there are parts in our current bylaw that we just passed that exempt bona fide farmers, they're overly restrictive, and they don't exempt them in a way that allows them to manage the wildlife that's on their properties. And I think that these hunters who are helping the farmers are regulated by the provincial government and through the licenses that they hold to operate these and to hunt, is that they're regulated enough. So I would hope that we could amend this bylaw to make the new bylaw apply to all the areas below the escarpment in red, and the old bylaw, which we've had for 50 years, right? And you may not have noticed, but we've had this bylaw for 50 years and there's been no real problems. Like the world hasn't been ending because of bow hunting in Grimsby. And so I think that if we amend it in this way, that we will allow it on the escarpment and not allow it below the escarpment until we can make a fulsome bylaw like Councillor Buffalo was talking about. I think we get both done in one fell swoop. Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I want to reiterate the words of Councillor Sharp. The new bylaw was brought in due to a safety concern. And if you look at the mapping and the different color scheme, the safety concern is still addressed under the new bylaw in the red area, if you're aware where it was. And the intent of the new bylaw was never to take away these rights of the bow hunters for them discharging their bows. So I think this is a perfect compromise right now until we can do a comprehensive review for another bylaw in the future. And I think that this here will allow these individuals to get out until the end of December. So, and I think that this is the easiest way to do it, as we all are aware that we've never really had well, I don't know of any concerns from any hunters out there, except for the concerns that we had in a rural, in a specific urban area in the ward that I represent. So I think this is a great compromise. I think this is, as you heard from Mr. McCray, that he thought that, you know, there was some in the consultation, the public open house the other night. He thought that this was that you could easily do this with putting a line in quickly, and we can proceed to a more comprehensive bylaw. So I'd like to say that that's why I support this. I think it's a great compromise, and it should allow those individuals to get out to do what they love. Thanks.
Councillor Cadwell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jordan. And I'm just looking at the map here too. And I didn't really, until Councillor Sharp, to his point about the farms out in the West End there that are just basically south of Regional 81. And I'm just thinking, well, yeah, there are a lot of farms out there. So that gives the opportunity for the farmers to protect their property. So I do like the map. I think it's good. The resolution that we're discussing now, I support it, and I look forward to staff with the outside professionals, everybody working together to come with a new compromise, good. I'll call it a hunting bylaw for Grimsby, and obviously this won't happen until sometime in the early new year, hopefully, or sooner the better in the new year. But again, I like what I'm seeing here, so I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Vardy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple comments. My own personal feeling is that I don't support sport hunting. That said, I do accept the need for hunting of pests and also culling of herds and the impact on farmers. So I understand all of that. And I can support what's being put forward. But that said, I still have safety concerns. And we've got to somehow make sure that these are respected. And, you know, I heard from someone today who found a deer blind on their property that they didn't put up. So trespassing, you know, is an issue. Hunters just going on farms where they don't have permission is an issue. And that's something that has to be addressed. The other thing is projectiles, whether they be bows or bullets, don't necessarily stop at the farm. If they miss the target, they can keep on going. So I am concerned about you know, sort of that kind of misadventure or accidents. So that's an issue. And I realize we probably can't do anything in what we're, you know, about to support or not support right now. But I think that that's something that has to be looked at because I don't think it's right for people to go onto farms without permission. And I think it's very easy for an accident to happen with a firearm or with a, bows are like high powered bows, crossbows. So, having once as a kid gotten caught in the crossfire of a bank robbery and nearly getting shot, I know that these things inadvertent can happen. So I just want to put it out there that one, we've got to make sure that there's no trespassing and that we make sure that people, have taken the right safety precautions, and that whatever their intended target is, if they miss it, they're not going to go onto somebody else's property. And then finally, I think it's important that whatever we do, we make sure that we communicate this, put it on our website, post it in well, it's too late now for this week's News Now, but maybe next week's News Now, put in an ad so that that people are aware. So that's my comment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bothwell.
Thanks again, Mayor Jordan. I totally understand where Councillor Sharp's coming from and what his intention is. I just have a concern that, again, we're putting another piece through that we haven't maybe looked at the full implications of how the bylaw is going to be read, because the motion suggests that the previous bylaw 7638 applied to the areas south of the Niagara Escarpment and is shown in green on the boundary map, which I understand the intent is to allow bow hunting then in that area. My concern is that we rescinded the previous bylaw by implementing the new bylaw, I thought. And so therefore it really isn't in play. So I don't know how we can make it apply to a portion of this. I just have issues overall about how legally we can make this happen. And then I have a concern about map number 2, where the green area extends all the way down to the railroad tracks in town and Casablanca Boulevard, and abuts the neighborhoods on Casablanca Boulevard with no buffers. And every other bylaw has buffers in it. So I think that if we were going to use a map, I would use map 1 and extend it just to the edge of the escarpment, which is what many of the attendees at the public meeting suggested, is don't end it at Ridge Road, bring it to the edge of the escarpment. And I think that would be a better idea. But overall, I think to make this clean, I don't think we can just add a map with this motion to our new bylaw. And the way it's worded, I think and the clerk will have to clarify, but I think it's going to cause grief because we rescinded the previous bylaw and put the new one in place. So I don't think it legally can hold water. So I just have a concern about how it's worded. And I'm just, again, going back to my thinking that if there's an easier way just to totally rescind the new bylaw and revert to the old one, then we deal with the problem, it's clean, and then we can get the mapping and everything and all the other language worked out later. I got to ask the clerk, because I have a concern that we're adding maps and not amending any other language in the bylaw that defines the maps, and I think we need to do that.
Sarah?
Do you mind just giving me a second to work out the logistics of that while that's happening, if the mayor can take the questions?
Yeah, because Sarah, I think things like some of the sections you're going to have to say, like where it says that this bylaw, it's prohibited unless in accordance with this bylaw. So you're going to have wording in here that says it's permitted in certain areas as per the map definition, blah, 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 and all that. So there's a bunch of amendments you're going to have to do to the bylaw just to insert the maps into it, or the map into it. And I just have a concern that, again, like I said, with the second map, that it goes right into next to the urban boundary. And as Councillor Vardy mentioned, there's always a potential that someone's going to go out and shoot a bow, perhaps be out in that wooded area near the Irish Grove woodlot or something on one of the farmers' fields, and it ends up discharging, which it's not across a road, but just a potential, being so close to the urban boundary.
What we'll do is we'll continue to the discussion as the clerk works on the bylaw. Councillor Vane.
Yes, I just want to add a couple of things to Councillor Vardy's comments about the trespassing and that. That's those things are all covered by provincial law. That's not an area I believe we have a right to make any laws that because the provincial law would override us. They're very valid concerns. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think conservation officers or possibly police will enforce the trespassing part. And one other thing to clarify on a bylaw, in early 2019, I don't remember the exact time, but we passed a bylaw that when we place ads, there's 2 local newspapers and we place them in both. We don't show favoritism towards one. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Councillor Sharp.
Thanks, Mayor Jordan. I just had a comment to respond to some of my colleagues. The one thing is that when there was a bit of a comment about that the projectiles, like an arrow, can travel for a longer distance, and what some of the hunters have told us before and at the public open house is that they're hunting from tree stands, and so they're 15 feet up in the air. And they're shooting at deer that are standing on the ground, and so the angle down, so like an arrow can travel for a certain distance until it hits something else, right? And like, what's that? Newton's first law: an object in motion will stay in motion until forever. But so it'll but if you're shooting at a downward angle, right, from 15 feet in the air, depending on how far away you're shooting at this deer, it's going to then hit the ground. And so we're not talking like projectiles. First of all, this is only bow hunting, not firearms. And these guys aren't shooting them up and out and at a straight angle. So I think that is one point to take into consideration. The other thing, Councillor Bothwell is talking about that the boundary ends at Casablanca and where the urban boundary begins. This bylaw that we're reverting to has been in place for more than 50 years. And there's not been like complaints that I know of, or certainly not frequent complaints if there has been any at all. And so people have been able to hunt. There's a field beside Casablanca. It's like, it's just barren. There's nothing in there. And so first of all, I don't think hunters will go there because I don't think there's any game there, right? It's like it's too close to the road. These hunters, like they dress up in camouflage and they like douse themselves with like pheromones and they hide in the bush. And like, I don't think these guys are sitting at the corner of Emily and Livingston and like shooting into a backyard from the field behind there. So I think we really have to take into logical consideration that the hunters are not going to be standing on the side of the road shooting at deer. That it doesn't make practical sense. There's not like, so yeah, you might hunt obviously in an area where you can find quiet and you can set your blind up. You obviously need to get permission. That was a good point. But these guys aren't sitting at the edge of Casablanca, sitting on top of a fruit stand, shooting at like coyotes on the side of the road.
He's so elegant or eloquent.
Thanks, Councillor Van. Your mute came off here. But anyway, so my point is, these guys, if you're an experienced hunter, which I am not, but I can imagine, like if you want to hunt for these animals, you have to be quiet and you have to be out in an area where they're not gonna find you. You're not gonna be sitting on the edge of Casablanca at the corner of Livingston and hoping to catch a deer, right? So I really think, aside from mischievous, someone who would like stand in the field and shoot like arrows at cars, which is illegal, and we can call the police on that. So I think that we're kind of overstretching. Like we've had one incident where a person was shooting a bow in their backyard for target practice, and that we've decided, okay, we need to do a change, and we've changed it. But in 50 years or more, we haven't had serious problems with this, and I think that the change to this bylaw will remedy the situation that we had. And so the other last thing I know I've been taking a little while here, is that sorry, I lost it. That's all. Thank you.
Jeff Stevenson has some comments that he'd like to add about probably mitigation of this. Jeff?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do believe that if we look at section 3 of prohibitions and we put some wording in that section, which would probably be section 3.4, and it would say, no person shall discharge a firearm or a bow in the prohibited area of the town, as defined in Schedule A to this bylaw, and that would be the map and the bylaw. And that would cover the using of bows and firearms in the red area of the town, which is what we're trying to avoid. And that would allow them to use the old bylaw, because bows aren't restricted in the previous bylaw.
Great, thank you. Councillor Vardy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As eloquent as that was, Councillor Sharp, I'm not expecting people to be standing at the corner of downtown and shooting. I believe the Bruce Trail runs along the escarpment. Am I correct, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, it's right at the brow of the escarpment, certainly from Wolverton to partway almost to Klein Mountain Road, Klein Mountain Road, but where it goes down below. So it is in that area, and it's in the area in the east end of town as well.
So if the border extends to the edge of the escarpment, I mean, we could, I'm not saying we are, but we could be putting people in harm's way. And, you know, laugh if you like. I know personally people who've lost a nephew in a hunting accident. We have to be cognizant about safety. We've all heard the stories of people driving by a highway and getting hit by a bullet of some hunter that's off hunting, because the bullet carries on. So we're not just talking about bows. We are talking about, if we revert to the old bylaw, we are talking about hunting. And as I say, I'm not against it. I just want to make sure that we put in the right kind of provisions for public safety. Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I can understand the situation of the safety aspect and all the rest, but I do want to reiterate what Councillor Sharp said, that the old bylaw had been in place for the last 50 years. So I'm hoping Councillor Sharp will allow me to put forward that friendly amendment made by our staff right there, Mr. Stevenson, with the new bylaw. If we can incorporate that in, then I think that covers all the grounds. And again, we've never had any issues with the hunters in regards to hunters or the discharge of bows in the green area. Actually, until just recently, until the past, the past year in an urban area. And I think most people have been respectful. So if Councillor Sharp will agree to make that friendly amendment that Mr. Stevenson made, I would like to call the question.
Well, I accept that amendment. And just one last thing, Mayor Jordan. If to the clerk, if we can attach the bylaw from 1976 as an appendix to the current bylaw to alleviate Councillor Bothwell's concerns that it's been rescinded, if we attach it as an appendix so that it can be all found in one place.
Perfect. Amen.
The clerk's going to speak on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if we have some wording, it's that the current bylaw 2062 be rescinded and that the previous bylaw 7638 come back into effect, and that we add a section 3.4 that states no person shall discharge a firearm or bow in the prohibited area of the town as outlined in Schedule A to this bylaw. That Schedule A would be the map 2.
That's almost the complete opposite of the motion that I made. So the motion that I made was, the intent was to keep our current bylaw and to amend it to say that, to add that boundary, and then have the new regulations, restrictions apply to the area in red, which is below the escarpment for the most part, and have the old bylaw apply to the area in green, which is south above the escarpment for the most part. And then if we could attach the old bylaw as an appendix to the new bylaw, and we would also obviously attach the map to the new bylaw. And remember, this is only temporary, right? Because we are, in this resolution, we're also instructing staff to bring us a comprehensive new bylaw. So this allows what was previously allowed for 50 years or more in Grimsby. It will allow that on top of the escarpment in that area that's green. And it will allow our new bylaw, which is super restrictive. It doesn't allow slingshots, pellet guns, paintball guns, airsoft guns. It's almost more than I want to allow. But that is a discussion that we can have when we do our fulsome review of the other bylaw. Right now, what we're doing is we're trying to protect and save the bow hunting season for hunters, and we're trying to allow farmers to manage their wildlife on their farms. And I think that the way I had the resolution written is the way that I want to keep it. And I would accept that amendment that that our bylaw officer suggested and that Councillor Ritchie proposed.
Jeff, would you like to speak on that?
Thank you, Your Worship. From an administrative point of view, it's an easier process for staff to amend the old bylaw as opposed to trying to amend the new bylaw. It's a much cleaner way of doing it, and from an enforcement point of view, it's a much easier way to interpret the reading of the bylaw for staff and also for the public.
Okay, then with that being said, through the mayor, if I could change my resolution to make it so that we rescind the new bylaw and that we reinstate the old bylaw and that we attach the new bylaw to the old bylaw, and we also attach that's the boundaries in map number 2, and that the new bylaw attached as appendix would apply only to the area in red, and that the old bylaw would obviously.
It's just too confusing for the public. He wants to attach both bylaws.
So I heard that, but I don't want to make it too much for the public, but we want to include the restrictions for the urban area, right? Because we don't want people necessarily, although it was allowed, but we don't want people necessarily shooting slingshots at our houses, right?
I prefer to follow staff's lead and however which way we can get this worded, that it's simplified for right now, and then we move to a new bylaw and work on that. And when we get the new bylaw, we get it working properly.
So thanks, Mayor Jordan.
And Antoinette is going to comment
It's
right
my
now.
resolution.
Antoinette?
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. And but I do agree, and I would like some input from staff. Have you guys come up with, because I discussed this with the clerk before the meeting, and Like this is not new. We already discussed the way that I originally brought it was worded and reviewed by the clerk before. So now there's a change in tone, and it's like they want to change. I mean, I sought advice from the clerk, so I'm willing to change it. I don't want to seem too hard-nosed, but let's hear why.
Antonetta, you'd like to comment?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I think, oh, sorry, they're just going to mute. As we're discussing it in the room here. Sorry, bear with us. There we go. Our apologies for that. Oh, it's still happening. You're not on mute, Jeff. There we go. Okay, so our apologies for that technical difficulty. I think in terms of making it simpler for the public to understand, we're concerned that if we revert to the old bylaw and then attach the current bylaw as a schedule or an appendices to it and then have a map to it, that it may be confusing from an interpretation perspective. So our recommendation remains that we rescind the current bylaw, revert to the old bylaw, and add that section that states that no person shall discharge a firearm or bow in the prohibited area of the town as outlined in Schedule A to the bylaw, and that Schedule A will be the map number 2. So I think we're thinking from a bylaw, both and enforcement perspective, that would just be cleaner for us to work with. And again, remember, this will be temporary until we can consult with the stakeholders, including, the delegates who are on tonight, Mr. McCray and Mr. Weismer, and, come up with something that really suits everybody and respects both the heritage activities, the hunting, the concerns of the farmer, as well as public safety. So it's just a temporary measure. And we think, our recommendation after talking about it at the table here is that that still remains the cleanest and most effective way to proceed, in our opinion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Antonetta.
I'm okay with that, Mayor Jordan.
And I'm okay with that too. And I'd like to call the question, please.
All right, the mover and seconder is okay with the amendment, so the clerk's preparing it right now.
I believe Councillor Cadwell has only spoken once. If you'd like to continue on with the conversation, Mayor Jordan's not my call, but up to you. And I'd like to call a question after. I think everyone almost has spoken twice on the matter except for Councillor Vane.
Yeah, and I think Councillor Bothwell has only spoken once as well. So Councillor Cadwell?
She doesn't have her hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jordan. Just a comment from the meeting of last week. I know there's a lot of concerns with safety in that, and I agree. I totally agree. Safety is the first priority to this as part of this new bylaw. But the hunters referenced a lot about their operations, I'll call it, with regards to the Ministry of Natural Resources, and game wardens came up. And I'll tell you, I learned a lot again too. Game wardens have a lot of power. So again, with all due respect, the hunters are, I think, we don't want to see or hear of it, but there are accidents that happen. And I've been involved with this since I've been on council. And again, 2008, we had a bit of a discussion to it, and it didn't get any further. I'm not going to get into the reasons now, but I haven't heard of any accidents yet. But again, I just think saying that learning what I learned last week, the hunters seem to be, it's their sport. They enjoy it. They're even teaching, a lot of them are even teaching their children how to hunt or how to operate a bow or whatever. That was brought up too. So a lot of good discussion last week. So anyways, I just want to throw that out for comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cadwell. The question has been called, so we're just waiting for the resolution. And I just want to comment that it is good that we're finally addressing this, and as we move forward, we will have something that we'll be proud of and updated to get it into this century, for that matter, because it's been
Ask for a
around.
recorded vote too, please.
Sure. Councillor Ritchie's requested a recorded vote. I'll read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Sharp, second by Councillor Ritchie. Resolved that the memo regarding discharge of firearms and bows, bylaw 20-62, be received, and further resolved that staff be directed to bring a comprehensive bylaw for discharge of firearms and bows, and that the following be approved to be enforced until the new bylaw is implemented. That the current bylaw 20-62 be rescinded, and that the old bylaw 76-38 come back into effect, and that we add a section 1.1 that states no person shall discharge a firearm or bow in the prohibited area of the town as outlined in Schedule A to this bylaw, with the Schedule A being map number 2. The clerk's going to call the recorded vote.
Councillor Bothwell,
Yes.
Councillor Dunstall's not present. Councillor Frake is now not present. Councillor Cadwell,
Yes.
Councillor Ritchie,
Yes.
Councillor Sharp,
Yes.
Councillor Vane,
Yes.
Councillor Vardy,
Yes.
Mayor Jordan.
Yes.
That's carried.
Up next, we need a mover and seconder for the confirming bylaw. Councillor Vane, Councillor Cadwell. Moved by Councillor Vane, seconded by Councillor Cadwell. Resolved that leave be given to introduce bylaw number 20-88 inclusive, and that be read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. Need a mover and seconder for second and third reading. Councillor Vardy, Councillor Ritchie. Moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Ritchie. Resolved that leave be given to introduce bylaw number 20-88 inclusive, read a first time, now be read a second and third time, and finally passed, and the mayor and town clerk do sign and seal the same, and rule of the council to contrary notwithstanding. All in favor? That's carried. And meeting is adjourned. Good work, everyone, and have a good evening.
Night.